to our customer. So we owe it to our customers to provide this great product or service at this reasonable price point. So I want to take you through some lean principles. You're going to hear me say customer more than once during this presentation. The customer is the one who defines value, and that can be an internal or external customer. So don't always think of it as your external customer. They define the value. So we want to deliver value, the value that the customers require, on demand. And there's ways that we do that. We want to flow value. So we want to figure out how to continuously flow that value to them through our products and services. We want to match their customers' pace. The word's called tact. Think of a metronome. We want to give the customers, provide the customers value at their pace that they desire. We want to pull, we want to replace based on consumption. And then we want to have zero defects. So we do not want to make or pass on defects. So Toyota had very much as its premise this notion of quality and doing things right the first time. I've visited a number of manufacturing facilities around the country, and clients that I work with today, we have this discussion about the quality assurance or quality control programs. And if you think about that from a customer perspective, the customer expects that you're going to produce your product or service the right way the first time. And that quality is something that they don't want. That quality inspection step is something that they don't want to pay for. So how can you build a process that embeds that quality step and that quality mentality into the process without having to have another process, which ensures that the first process was done correctly? So if you think about that from, again, a customer perspective, we're really honing in on that. We want things done right the first time. So how do we create that process that gives us that consistent result without having to put inspection into the process? So we want this standardized work. So improvement starts with a standard. I tell my clients, when we develop processes, we're going for better, not perfect. We want something documented. We need a framework to start with. Then we can start improving upon that. But we need something documented, a base case, in order to evaluate how we're doing and improve that process. And then you want to do problem solving to improve processes. And what that means from a lean perspective is that you're really going to Gemba, which is the place where the work is done, to gain understanding and learn. And that's where the work is happening. That's why we always suggest engage your employees. They're the ones that are doing the work. Have them help you define those processes because they're going to be using them ultimately. Keep it out of the leadership team's hands or the executive team, and get down to the people that are doing the work and really engage them, not only in how the processes are being developed and designed, but then how can they be improved? And that will accomplish a lot of things, primarily around employee engagement and buy-in, because if they've had that voice in creating that process, they're going to be more apt to follow the process, give you ideas for improvement of the process. So another big key to lean is that employee engagement piece and how we are utilizing all of this talent that we have within our four walls and the people doing the work. So Deming said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Love that statement. If you can't describe what you are doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. So when we talk about waste and missing processes, the areas that we find those 10 to 15 basis points of improvement can be outlined by the acronym called downtime. So downtime, the D is defects. So those are products or services that are out of specification that require resources to correct. Again, that's going back to we should have this expectation that our processes are going to create the product that we desire correctly the first time. We don't want to layer in another process to ensure that the first process is followed. So defects are a cost of waste and missing processes. Overproduction, if we're not outlining how much we need and we're producing too much product before it's sold, that's considered waste. Now, the latest supply chain challenges and world may require some additional investment in inventories, but for the most part, we should be really understanding and aligning our production to demand. Waiting is the next waste. So if you look at your employees and engage your employees and they have to, in any kind of situation, whether it's manufacturing or service, if they need to wait for work before they're able to do their job, then that's considered waste. They're not being productive. The N stands for not engaging employees. Employees that are not effectively engaged in the process. And you can do that in a number of ways. As I said, have them help you design and define and document the processes. Have them show you what they're doing. Observe the employees as to what they're doing. That's another great way to determine what the processes should be. Put employee teams together. Have them work with other work groups, those that are upstream and downstream, to really gain an understanding of what the implications of what I do, what that, the implications that that has on someone further down the line. We often in our sessions have, let's say, the finance team, who is way downstream in a lot of the processes, present in, some of the sales or operations processes. And what the sales and operations folks hear are that the implications, if they don't do things that they potentially perceive are, well, I don't really need to fill in that required field or provide that information. When they see and hear that person from accounting say, when you don't do this, when you don't provide that information for me, by the time it gets to me, it's this big old snowball that I have to unravel and spend all this time. And now I'm not able to be effective in my job in order to collect money for the company. So it really helps by engaging all of those employees, not only the ones that are directly doing the work, but then those that are inherit the work downstream, engage them as well. And they can actually help reinforce the need for specific requirements that become part of your process and your process language. Transportation. So that's transporting items or information that is not required to perform the process from one location to another. So if you're moving things around excessively, that's considered a waste. Inventory, we talked about that in light of overproduction. So it's inventory or information that's sitting idle, that's not being processed, that's not being worked on. That's considered waste or inefficient or missing processes. Motion. In motion, you get a lot of information about motion when you actually observe employees. So have your employees observe each other and see, are we wasting motion? I worked for P.F. Chang's, the restaurant company, and we would spend a lot of time in the kitchens actually documenting. It's a technique called spaghetti diagrams, where you have a layout graphic of the area that you're observing. So we had maps of our kitchen, and we would actually follow an employee around with a pen you would follow them, and you'd have your pen on your paper, and you would document where they went over the course of, let's say, an hour or two. And you begin to see these patterns and trends when you know their primary workstation is at this location, but they've had to go 18 different places around the kitchen. And you can see that by the repetition of lines. It looks like this big old pile of spaghetti on a plate. And you can start to understand and question, why do they have to leave the area where they're doing the work? What reasons are they? And then you can look at that from a process perspective and become more efficient. And we determined, okay, we need to bring supplies to the work center rather than having the employee go get supplies, because that interrupted their workflow. And that was through that lean tool. And then extra processing is the E in downtime. So performing any activity that is not necessary to produce a function or service. So that's a simple acronym, downtime, that you want to take a look at the processes or the waste that's in your company today and see what's missing and what those potential costs are. So when we talk about steps to creating core processes, first we need to identify them. Sounds simple, but that's the first place to start. Your organizational chart, your accountability chart, whatever methodology you're using to lay out your organization structure, that's a good starting point. You want to go that kind of next layer down and identify, okay, how do products and services move through our organization? And then layer on the support organizations like HR, finance, purchasing potentially, that support all of those key functions. So first we want to identify those core processes, and you should have about a dozen or so what I would consider core processes to the business. Then you want to get a team together to document them. And what that means is really looking at that high level, what's the 20% that gets you 80%, really focusing in on what is critical to the outcome of that particular process. What are those key steps or key activities that we need to be performing in order to complete all steps of the process? Then you want to test them. So you're going to document them, and then you're going to take them into the place where the work is done and figure out, okay, do these work? Do we have the right steps? Do we have them in the right order? Do we have the 20% that gets us 80%? Also, as you're doing this, as you're documenting and as you're testing, determine what level of individual and what level of competency they need to be able to perform the process. Are you designing processes for that brand new employee who has never done that particular task? Or are you designing the process to be efficient and useful for someone who has performed the process, that has experience? Because we're going to get new employees up to that point. And then you want to train and follow up with your employees. So you ultimately want to train, allow them to establish these processes for a time, then follow up, and then continuously improve. I suggest to clients that they wait at least 90 days and work with a process once they've documented, tested, and trained it, to allow it to work. Gather any input during that time about things that aren't working, unless it's totally off the rails, and then you should modify it. But you have to stick to a process for at least 90 days. Then you can start to gather information and data and measurables and scorecards, and we'll talk about that here in a little minute, before you start to improve them. But you want to just stick with it and then just capture any ideas for improvement before you just go ahead and change it. Because if you continue to change the process, every week or every few days or even every month, then you're really signaling to the team we don't have a process. So that's why it's important that you stick with the process for, I want to say, at least 90 days. So when we talk about process flow diagrams, my friend Deming said a bad process will beat a good person every time. So we've got these scenarios here, what you think it is, and what's actually going on there is in the middle. And that little offshoot towards the bottom, that's what we call a workaround. That's what your teams get out, Band-Aids and duct tape, and just get things done. So you want to, as you're working with your teams to develop and document processes, really surface where they have workarounds, where they have to get out the Band-Aids and duct tape and do extra processing and do all those downtime waste activities that we talked about in order to get to that end state. And then what you're looking for is that ideal future state. Again, first pass through or any pass through, it's just better. It's better. It's not perfect. You want to get something out there, get a foundation, get a framework. Without data, all you have is an opinion. I am a self-proclaimed data junkie. So as you're going through and identifying processes, make sure that you're gathering data. If people say, well, that's not working, or I believe this to be happening. There's lots of opinions. Figure out how to quantify and collect the data. So you're coming at any changes that you need to make with data, not opinions. So I continually ask my clients when I'm working with them, do you have the data to support that, or is that just an opinion? Do we need to collect data for a period of time to really see, is that an issue, or discover themes and trends? And what that's going to lead us to is this definition of a standard process. So if we have a standard process, and this is one that we used at PF Chang's when I was working there, we set clear expectations for content. That's what we need to do. We set a sequence. These are the order we should do the steps in. Timing, we associated with how long it takes the average person. So not the newest person, but the average person to do that. And it's fun to put out there that this is average and who wants to be average once you get to executing these processes. And then the outcome, what the end result should look like. A lot of people are visual learners, so it's important to address different learning styles. So we included a combination of both text and pictures to allow for the different learning styles. So you need to think about that as you're going through and documenting your processes. What's the typical user? Someone in sales has a very different mindset and way that they view the world versus someone in finance or accounting. So you don't necessarily need to have the same format for a process for each of those teams, but what's the right way for the people that are in that role? What's the best way for them to learn? So standard process, having a standard process is the key to driving continuous improvement through eliminating the noise caused by everyone doing it differently. So think back to our snowflake exercise. We all had slight variations in our snowflake. If we had had a standard process, you would have seen, okay, we need to start with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You need to fold it, hamburger versus hot dog. I learned that a few weeks ago. You need to tear off this size of piece from the corner, or maybe we would develop a tool or instrument if that was important and critical to the success. So again, you're going to do that step by step to get that consistent and desired output. So now is the time to enter your core processes assessment score in the poll now.
So if you didn't get this earlier, if you didn't fill it out, Nicolette also put it in the chat.
Thanks,
So it is
Nicolette.
over there.
So we'll give it a couple more minutes. to get some scores entered. So we've got one response in the 40 to 44 category, and then a number of responses in the less than 40 category from your scores. Can we
Less than
keep the
40 's
poll
coming in.
open while I move on?
Sure.
I can't see the poll. I saw it. Maybe it's my fault and I just closed it. Maybe other people have this problem.
It's in the
I can,
link.
I can still see it on my screen.
All right, I won't worry about it. It's probably just me.
So remember your score and we will go on. Do I have to, maybe I'll minimize it. There we go. So we're going to summarize the results later. So my final piece that I'm going to talk about is using scorecards to manage processes and performance. So as I said, I'm a self-proclaimed data junkie, and scorecards can really help us sustain our processes and help guide us to where to make improvements. So scorecards really help us manage process and results and engage the whole team. So what we're really looking for on our scorecards are those leading indicators that tell us early on in the process that the process is about to go off the rails. Lagging indicators are the ones, the reporting the news indicators that tell us after the fact that the process is, something has gone wrong. And then there may be compliance measurables associated with our key tasks in the process being performed. And then you're going to utilize your scorecard to tell you, okay, where do we need to do problem solving to identify where we've got issues or opportunities. The other use of scorecards is really to quantify exceptions. I hear from a lot of clients, well, we've got all these different scenarios, and should we document those when we're doing process documentation? And my advice initially is put it on a scorecard so that you understand what's driving the exception, that it's highlighted through a scorecard. Then do your root cause problem solving to understand why you have an exception rather than documenting how to take care of the exception. I want to make sure that you're doing the right problem solving to eliminate as much as you can those exceptions before you choose to document and acknowledge that we've got exceptions in the system. And scorecards are a great way to do that. They can help you manage your exceptions. And then root cause problem solving, either using 5 whys or there's other techniques out there to get to really what is the root and get away from the symptom. Fixing symptoms, really dig hard and deep when you're doing your issue solving or your problem solving to make sure that you're getting at the root and you're really identifying a solution that will get to the root cause of the problem. And then again, use your scorecards to tell you, have we gotten to the root of the problem? So again, self-proclaimed data junkie, love scorecards. They're really a great tool in helping you manage both process and performance. And then Eric, it's back to you.
Awesome. So if you can stop sharing. Okay. So thank you, Heidi. And I think you're going to end up wrapping up on this as well. So now I'm going to share my screen. So our whole system, this is a big part of our system, this whole process component. It's really important for our companies. And like I said, one of the issues with this particular part of our system is that small businesses struggle to do it. And one of the reasons that we like Heidi so much is she can come in, her team can come in, and for what is not a lot of money, in my opinion, I think it's a good value. which is one of the criteria for any of our partners, is to be a good value for small businesses. I think Heidi's team is a good value. She will come in and help you build the framework for this so that your team can then come in and build them into more specifics across the organization. But if you ask one of the biggest issues why companies don't do this, they lack the framework and thinking around the whole thing in the first place. And they don't know where to start. And they try, they don't have a champion internally, and then it fails. And I would say when I'm generally an optimistic person, but I can tell you maybe 20% of our clients, when we start working with them, maybe 10% of our clients actually are nailing process, and that even 10% may be charitable. So if you're really wondering what's the difference between why I'm small and can't get to the next level, this is one of the biggest places to look, what she's talking about. So we have tools that we put in place in our system, and whether you're working with us or not, we can send these to you and so you have these available to you. And one of them is this tool we call the 80/20 checklist. Now we have a new leadership manual coming out. All of you are going to be getting it very soon if you're a client. And one of the tools in this is these 80/20 checklists, and it's very, very, very basic. First, you want to make sure that every document every process you have in your company is documented in checklist format, and we want to make sure that all the key individuals agree on the process. Okay, Heidi mentioned it, really important. She talked about figuring out what your 10 to 15 core processes are. They could be customer service related, finance related, operations related. You got to really identify what those top processes are, because then you start building into the sub processes in those processes. But one of the key things is to get everybody to agree on what those things are. And the question I get a lot is, do I need to read everybody else's processes? And the answer is yes, because that's your company's operations manual, and you really need to read it. You certainly need to make sure you understand the one that relate to you, and anything that's dependent on what you're doing, ideally you read them all, but the senior leadership team needs to make sure they all agree on them. Next thing is that each process needs to have enough information so that somebody who's already been trained can use the document. So this is not meant to replace a training program or a detailed training manual. Some people also confuse that. They say, well, I want a detailed training manual, so I'm going to hire a process optimizer. This is not detailed training manual. That's not process. Process is the order of operations, like Heidi showed you in that screen. It's the high level stuff. It's the key things. It's that 20% she talked about that becomes your secret sauce. So we want to make sure that a new employee can come in and they start doing something, and it's a salesperson. They know that a great sales presentation has maybe 4 or 5 key things, and those 5 things are what matters most. And that's it. If it's a service person and they're doing an account management function, every call, what does that call have to look like? Has to have at least these 6 things in that call done in this order. That's process. Where entrepreneurs struggle, they combine process with the training manual. Nobody remembers what's going on now. They forget everything. They don't know what the core processes are. They forget. So we want to make sure in these checklists that we're documenting only enough information so that they can feel the secret sauce when the clients are working with us, and so that internally we're capturing the most important things from a service and operations basis. And then if I had to pick one of the most important bullets on here, number 4, and this is really what Process Optimizer offers, is organize these processes into an easy to use manual with a table of contents. I cannot tell you how many organizations we work with, and I actually would raise our hand and say we're still one of them, have great processes written, but they're all over the place. They're literally all over the place. There is no manual written that the people feel beholden to put things into the manual. When you're writing processes, you're actually writing your book. And we need you to write a book. So when you write a book, you think, what is a table of contents? A table of contents should be the list of those key processes. And everybody should know what the names of those processes are. In our company, we're working on still learning, it's muscle memory. We're learning, is this a process? If so, what chapter does it go into? Who's going to write it? Get back to us when the process is written, put it in the manual. That's our language. If it doesn't happen like that, it ends up getting documented. We don't know where it is. So you got to have that table of contents. 80/20 checklists are not SOPs. They're not training. It's the process itself. And process ownership, in our case, Heidi, should appear on the role map, accountability chart, org chart, whatever system you're using. If you're using EOS for scaling up, or Pinnacle, whatever systems you're using. For us, it's the role map. We want to make sure, and I'll show you exactly how we recommend doing that in the next slide. We want to make sure that people know what processes they own. Okay, so we have this process adoption checklist. Once again, it's in our toolbox. If you're a client, if you're not, we'll send it to you on the slide deck. The objective of the process adoption checklist is to ensure that company processes are adopted consistently across your entire organization. So we get this stuff written, we have all these processes, now we got to make sure they actually get followed. And that's where it gets tough. I shouldn't even say that's where it gets tough, because the first part's tough too. This is where it gets, you really got to make sure that the first part is useful. So to do that, people need to follow them. So one, make sure they're clearly documented in a manual with a table of contents and people know where to go to find stuff. That's your 80/20 checklist. That's number one in process adoption. You don't have number one, you're not going to be able to get adoption because there's nothing to adopt to. Okay, so that's number one. Easy to find and access. The key process ownership is incorporating the position agreement. Now, I'm gonna get to that in a second, but people need to know who owns what parts of the process. They need to know who the who is that the process is for. Team members need to then be explicitly trained in the process. That's a webinar for a future day. If I had to say that the second worst thing that you're worst at is training. By the way, when I say we, you, I mean me and us as small business people. One of the biggest differentiators of a company, you start getting in that $50 million plus range where a lot of you want to be. You get in those $50 million plus companies, they have a lot of training in place. $50 million and below, training to them is read this, you look competent, you're good to go. That is not training, and it won't lead to scale if you do that. So you have to make sure that once these things they know what they are, they know what they own, they need to be trained. We follow the 7 times rule. You need to train it 7 times at least before you expect compliance. If you're one of those managers who says, I told them how to do it, they should be able to do it, you are not a good manager. I'm sorry, you are not. A good manager is 7 times. Now, it shouldn't be 8, 10, or 20 times. That becomes fine tuning. If you have to tell them the same thing over and over again, you're correct. At a point, it just becomes too much. But 7 times is where you really want to be before it becomes too much. Sorry for the printer background noise, by the way. This is I apparently am in the printer hub in my house. So that's what that background noise is. So next thing is processes are tied into scorecard when applicable. Heidi mentioned that, really important. We got to make sure that this is put on a scorecard. And we want to follow the natural consequences approach. No workarounds. So people, the question I get a lot is, I get this a lot from all of you. What happens if people don't follow them? I get that a lot. So now this is if you're a client, you do what you all want on your own time. If you are a client and you ask that question to me, what if I trained them and they just didn't follow it? I say, make sure that they are bought in and they understand it. Ask them for edits if they have any edits and they see if they make any sense. But if you've done that and they won't follow the process, I think you got to help them to find another position, ideally maybe in a different organization. It may need to be moved out. If they can't follow the process, I don't know what to tell you. So the question I get, what if they won't follow my processes? I don't know. I know if I don't follow processes in my company, everybody screams at me. So if they could fire me, they probably would. So that's my answer to you. If they can't follow your processes, have a meeting and make sure they're really on team, whatever you're on, and then move on. So that's what we call natural consequences. I love that. I'm sure Kristen picked that. If I had written that, it would not have sounded that lovely. Update processes proactively, not just when problems arise. Constantly evaluate your machine to make sure it's good. Automate whenever possible over time. If there's any process that can be automated, do it. Because once you have the processes documented, you can then look at them and say, are there opportunities for automation now? Address non-compliance immediately. Do we have the wrong process? Is it the wrong person? Do they need support or help or more training? What do they need? But non-compliance needs to be addressed immediately, just like you do with your kids when they don't comply. And you need to have a commitment to process adoption. If you can't follow the process, you just can't work here. And if you can follow the process on the positive side, you're going to be part of an amazing organization, because process run organizations, you feel them. The companies that you all know and love, a lot of the reasons you love them is because they're working a process that you like inserting yourself into. So when you like, the reason you like Starbucks, they have that down. You like Apple, they have that down. Their processes are not long, but they all know what those are. They're very, very basic processes that make up those organizations. So that's our checklist. Once again, you're welcome to have it. If you're not a client, if you are, it's coming to you on our leadership manuals very shortly. If you follow that checklist, you're going to get adoption across your company. And we're in the home stretch here on our tools. Last thing we have is this thing called position agreement template, which I'm going to give credit on this one to where credit's due. I'm going to give credit to Bay State Therapy. So if you need physical therapy, go to Bay State. They're massive. They're a great client of ours. And they introduced me to this template, and I said, can I use that? And they said, absolutely. And they have hundreds and hundreds of employees across New England. They showed me this thing. I said, that is really good. And this is designed to give your team members complete clarity and what will be expected from them in their roles. So do we have an example that's filled out? We do. Okay. So, okay. So one, we have this is all in a template. You want this, just email me, we'll get it for you. One, you list their key accountabilities at the top. If you're using a role map, accountability chart, whatever system you're using, put their key accountabilities for the position at the top. Now, a person can have 2 or 3 position agreements if they're in multiple seats. So they may have multiple versions of these, but they need to have their accountabilities at the top that come right from that role map. Next, what are the key measurables or scorecard items they own? Usually 2, 3, or 4 per person, no more, per seat, I should say. And then next, what are the key processes they own? There's not usually many of them, believe it or not. Now, if they sit in multiple seats, they're going to have multiple processes, but we have to make sure that everybody who works for you, when they come work for you, all you're really asking them to do is to follow these processes. That is their job. The process is their job itself. So we want to make sure they know these are the key processes that I own. Is it account management? Is it customer service? What are the ones that I own? You have this whole thing here. They're good to go. They know what you expect of them. They know what their key high-level accountabilities are, and they basically know how to do it. If the employee needs to create the processes, as is often the case with small business, including ours, note that those processes are TBD, and they can be developed as part of their role or that you need to help them develop. And then the signature below acknowledges that they understand and are willing to be responsible for the items set forth. And then here's an example of one of these. This is the director of sales and marketing. It's a high-level senior leadership position. It actually gets easier at the lower levels of the business, or I shouldn't say lower, but the levels that are, this is the top level. If you go 2 levels down, 3 levels down, it actually gets easier because the processes are fewer. So in this case, the accountabilities are managed sales and marketing team, sales and marketing plan, new business development, lead gen, content development. Pretty simple for a director of sales and marketing. They own 4 numbers, in this case, 4 key numbers: number of leads, number of marketing events, conversion rate, and referral requests. In this case, it's 2, 1, 50%, and 1. Pretty simple. Processes that they own, they achieve that, or the event planning process, sales process, the content development process, and the cross-selling process. They need to make sure they nail those things. And honestly, we believe, as Heidi pointed out, if the processes are right, they're going to achieve the numbers. Scorecard numbers are a result of well-done process. Every time. So when a company comes to us, or one of you guys comes to me and they says, you see, I can't figure out the person's scorecard numbers, I'll usually say, tell me their process of what processes do they own? And usually the answer is, I'm not sure. And then we have a problem. We have a person that's kind of misdirected. So we want to make sure we get the processes documented. And I can tell you, if you're struggling with your numbers, if people are good and you're struggling with your numbers, look to process next, because all they're doing is working your process. That's it. So look to your process. And that is an example of a position agreement. So why is Process Optimizer and process so important to us? Because our system requires that you have the processes documented to be able to actually use it. So really important for us. So you're using some other systems out there. It may not be as required. If you're a growth client, you're going to have to do process because we don't think you can run the company really well without doing it. I think, are we back to you, Heidi? Is this me? Oh, this is me. Okay. All right. Why processes matter. Heidi did a fantastic job on going through that. She went over downtime and all the things that go into that. For us, she's the expert on it. We are not. We just give it at a high level. Core process is documented plus followed by all equals consistency and stability, and you'll lose all those downtimes things, and you'll pick up those 10 to 15% basis points. I think Heidi's honestly being charitable on that. It may be 10 to 15% off the bottom line. I will tell you, it will prevent you from growing. So in a steady state business, you're losing money. You're losing money in a steady state from your existing revenue point. I can tell you, and this is us too, in our current company, we've grown very fast in the last couple of years. We are in the same boat, just like all of you, we're in the same boat. If we don't continue to button up processes at the next level, we will not grow this company. Won't happen. So you have to make sure that your processes are documented or you won't be able to hit those next growth sizes. Easier training, more fun. Heidi put it better. Happier employees, more profitability, and then ultimately results. All right, now Heidi, I think we're back to you on this one, right?
If you just want to keep clicking, you can see the various
Okay, awesome.
ranges of where your scores fit in. I know we had some that were less than 40, so you have significant room for improvement. So really take a hard look, use the tools that Eric outlined. Feel free to reach out to Eric to get to us. And then, in that 40 to 44 range, you've got some gaps and you may have some issues that are process-based. So look at your scorecards. Are they telling you what they need to tell you? Get with your employees, get that engagement up.
Yep. Yeah.
And those that are in the top tier, if there was anyone in the top tier, continuously improve those processes, make a point to revisit them.
Agreed. See if I got, okay. So a couple last things on this. Then we'll give you back some of your time today. A couple last things on this that are some big ahas for me. One, I can't say this enough. There in our system, we have a lot of stuff in our system and we work with clients in a lot of different areas, as all of you know. For me personally, this is for sure one of the worst things for me. It's one of the things I'm worst at. So if it's one of the things that you're worst at, all I can tell you is you got to do what I try and do. You got to lean into it. You just got to say, well, this is where I'm worst. That's probably a reason that I'm being affected, and just lean into it. Okay. This is one, I don't know what you're worst at. Could be any number of things. This is one of the things I'm worst at. So we try and lean into it and make it a big thing. Here's one of the biggest things I discovered. It was a hidden aha. And I'll leave you guys with this story and I'll tell you how to reach, how to use the service if you want to use the service. But this is a big aha for me. Heidi, I don't know if I told you a story, you'll chuckle. So in the collegiate entrepreneurs business, we became over many, many years, we became the pseudo in that company, the masters of process, honestly. We had a lot of employees, 600 employees all summer, college kids out there working on job sites. Imagine that is exactly how it seems, by the way. Imagine having a company with 600 college kids working all day. Yeah, good luck with that. I own that company. So we had to become the masters of process. Every single thing that was going on every day. We did it on table of contents. We ended up having training videos. We ended up having tests and the whole 9 yards. But we couldn't get that in place for years. We tried for years. We kept setting goals. Let's get these things written. Couldn't get it written. And then one day in one of my meetings, one of my longtime team members who's still with me, working in one of our companies, said to me, he said, Eric, I know a lot about process, and here's my suggestions. And I said, how do you know so much about process? He said, well, it was my major. That's what I majored in college. I'm sitting there thinking, you've been sitting here for years and never told us that was your major. He said, well, I don't know. I figured it wasn't important. So then I realized, and then I said, can you do some of this stuff? Because I couldn't get, one of the issues they have is that nobody wants to write these things. They just don't want to do it. So you say, go write this. So people write it and, they don't do it and it's tough to organize it. So so I said, Mike, why don't I pay you to write the processes? So I already paid him, by the way. He already had a salary. So the team is staring at me now like I'm an idiot. And I said, no, I'm going to pay you. I think I paid him $25 an hour or something like that. I said, I'm going to pay you $25 an hour to make sure these all get written, every single one. He spent 2 years doing it. He worked with all the departments. He wandered around and interviewed everybody. He was the point person on it. It cost me short money. I think by the time it's said and done, I think it cost me like, I don't know, six grand or $7,000. Took me years. This is us trying to figure it out on our own. But by putting somebody in charge of making sure it was done, it got done. Somebody has to own process in your company. You can do it by department head if you can pull that off. If you can't, my suggestion is to make sure somebody owns making sure that manual gets written. Somebody. And if you got to pay them extra for it, pay it, because it's got to get done. So interesting, Heidi, some of your clients actually that you worked for who absolutely love you, they say, we took Heidi's stuff. I'll tell you, NECI actually just hired somebody full-time to take all your stuff and run it across the entire company. They say, we're running this across the entire company. We're going to fill in all this stuff. We're going to make sure the whole company is trained on it. So Heidi's company can give you this framework and start filling all this in for you to get you rolling. After that, you're going to make sure you become a process company. You hire somebody to help you out with that internally, even if it's a short money like I did it, or if you want to put directors in charge of that, you got to do it. But someone's got to own the process. And if you do that, you're going to have a much higher chance of success. And that's how we nail process in that company. And that's how we do it now. So to reach Heidi, just reach out to us. info@cruiseconsultinggroup.com. Reach out to me, reach out to any of the consultants you're working for. So if you're on this webinar, just go to info@cruiseconsultinggroup.com and we'll make sure we connect you to Heidi. She has a great presentation. She'll tell you to make sure she know how she works. It's very comprehensive. But once again, we'll give you as much as we can for no charge to make sure you all go on your way and get what you get. We're here to help. You're welcome to schedule a call with us as consultants also to really help you with this. You know, no charge, we'll help you with this stuff, just the basics anyway, if you need help with that. And we'll give you all the tools we have in this webinar today as you need them. Does anybody have any questions at all about any of this stuff or comments before we wrap up? Questions, comments? Okay, we're going to give you some of your time back. I'm going to jump on the Peloton right now. I hope that you all do something awesome right now. Remember, if you're not a great process company, you're not going to grow. And if you're committed to becoming a great process company, you likely will. So this is it. This is your tool. Heidi, we're very, very grateful that you came and gave us your time today. Thank you so much. All of our clients, thank you for being supporters of us. Everybody else, keep kicking ass in the entrepreneur world. Great to see all of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Derek, thanks, Heidi.
Bye, everybody.